The poorest person in the world is not the one without money, but the one without a vision.
1, 2, 3, 4, yeah.
Hey, what's going on, landlords? This is Eric here at the RentPrep offices, and we are here with Steve White, and we also have a special guest in the office today. His name is Dr. Roger Firestien. Roger, you want to say hello?
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello.
Yes, so Dr. Roger Firestien, he is a creativity professor. He has pretty much pioneered creativity in many ways. He has been in the, how long have you been in the game for?
I don't really want to say, but 40 years. So
we invited Roger out here today. His pedigree, his credentials are incredible. He has worked with companies such as Disney, AT&T, Clorox, the Los Angeles Times, Farmers Insurance, General Electric, General Mills. The list goes on for about 100 more companies. He is also the senior faculty member at the International Center for Studies in Creativity at SUNY Buffalo State and co-director of the I4 studio at the Innovation Center, powered by the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. And we asked Roger onto the podcast today because we thought he could give some really interesting insights on vision and creativity and problem solving. So welcome to the podcast again, Roger.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, Roger, anything that I missed there as far as your introduction?
No, I think you pretty much caught it. Thank you, Eric. And we've known each other long enough to know that that might sound a little serious, but we have a lot of fun doing what we're doing. So,
Yes, we do. I actually, at a former job, a client of ours gave us a book, and I read the book, had a question on one of the creativity principles in it, because I found there was this really short read called Why Didn't I Think of That? And he actually included his email in the book, and I just emailed him. Had no idea when I did that he was actually local to the Buffalo, New York area. And he replied back and said, "You want to get coffee?" And I was like, absolutely. It's not every day you get to sit down with a professor of creativity, especially with somebody who's pioneered a lot of these principles. I had the opportunity to sit down with Roger and go through one of his visioning sessions. And I thought it would be really interesting for landlords because being a landlord, you're pretty much an entrepreneur. And I know, Steve, you've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs and landlords over the years, and you can probably see how they're one and the same at times.
Absolutely. And I thought, just meeting Roger, today's my first time meeting, and we've had a great conversation before we jumped on this podcast. And, he brought up a really, really great point, and it's kind of what we led the show off with was having the right vision. And he made a great point that I thought really connected well with landlords that, you don't want to have a property that you wake up at 3 a.m. and think about. And landlords really, something that we talk a lot about, especially on the podcast, is landlords have to have the right vision in place to know the right reasons why you're doing something and to kind of keep you on track. And I thought, Roger is a wealth of information to help landlords sort of establish that vision and creative ways to execute on that as well.
So, Roger, one of the companies that we had mentioned here that you'd worked with in the past is the Los Angeles Times. And from my understanding, you actually helped them set the vision for the entire company.
Yes, I did.
Can you describe what that process was like and why they called you out to work with them?
Yes, I'd done a lot of work with the Los Angeles Times and the Times Mirror families of companies a number of years ago. And the president and chief executive officer was in a number of those sessions. She was impressed with the creativity methods that I used with the folks that were working in the organization. And she asked me about the whole process of visioning. I've done work in the whole area of visioning since the early 1980s. I've done it personally. I've worked with athletes. I've worked with actors. I've worked with musicians. That's kind of how I got started in this because my background is in music. And it was really interesting. And I'm going to digress for a second. As I was going to music school, I remember one time I was a guitarist. And one of the things that you do is that you do juries. And so you play in front of your professors. Well, a friend of mine was a very good guitarist, and he was wonderful at practice times, but when it came time to go in and do that jury, he just fell apart. And I just remember him. He kind of went off the deep end, and he kicked his guitar case down the hall. And I asked him later, I said, what happened there? And he said, well, I got in there, I got really nervous, and I didn't have a picture of what I wanted to do. I didn't really have an image of what I wanted to do. So I started to play around with the whole idea of imagery and pictures, and that was in the late 70s, early 80s. So back to the Los Angeles Times. When I worked with the Los Angeles Times, Catherine Downing, the CEO at the time, asked me to come and work with their senior staff to help them create this vision for the future. Now, oftentimes when you think about working with a large corporation, you really think about looking at the numbers and you think about looking at the black and whites. Well, the way you begin a visioning process is you don't use words. You draw pictures because a vision is a picture. And so I asked the chief executive team to draw a picture of what the organization was going to look like 5 years out into the future. The thing that they had to do about this, there was one restriction. They couldn't use words. And this is difficult for them because they're in the words business, all right? And then after they drew the picture, they talked about the picture. Then we put words to it. And then from there, we created a vision, the words that came from that. And when they described their picture. In addition to that, I trained people within the Los Angeles Times family of companies. And they went out and they worked with employee groups to create their vision of the future for the paper. We then brought those combined visions of the future together, and then we had a large meeting where we built that into what the senior staff had, what the people throughout the organization did as well, move the paper forward incredibly. Now, what a vision is all it is really is just a picture of where you want to be somewhere out in the future. Right? But it's not just a picture in association with a vision. It's how does it smell? How does it feel? How does it taste? What are you doing? How are you interacting with the community? Who are you serving? Who are you not serving? What does your gut feel like when you're living this vision? And so that whole thing combined really creates that compelling vision for the future. It has to be something that's compelling. It has to be a bit of a stretch. It can't be business as usual.
That was amazing just to listen to that. One of the things that coming up in my mind as I was listening to you talk about this is I think landlords are very future-focused people in general. Mm-hmm. I think they are people who do keep a vision in mind because to take maybe $20,000, $30,000 to buy a property down just to get a little bit of that income back. I mean, you have to have a good sense of the future. It's definitely something that I think that I've thought about my own business as being a landlord. But I've never really thought about it in the way that you just described as far as creating a compelling vision, just being able to really be able to see what's going to be out in the horizon. What would you say as far as what are the benefits if you were to think of this as far as a landlord, like creating a compelling vision versus just saying, I want to have 20 rentals in 10 years?
Yeah, Eric, that's a really, really good point. And I want to come around to that from another angle. I have friends who have taken houses that have looked like a shambles and they have turned them into beautiful, beautiful properties because they have some skills to do that. And they also have this vision to be able to see what this property is going to be like. And for a landlord, I think that's a real spatial skill. So you can kind of see what this space might look like before you can do it. Now, that's in a real tangible way. You buy a piece of property, you gut it, you make it magnificent. I don't have that skill, Other people around me are beautiful at that. And so they can see a property, they can go, boy, we're going to do this and 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 really make it a beautiful property. That's on the tangible level. Eric, what you talked about as far as a vision for the future is concerned is that one of the things that we find is that when you create a vision for the future, particularly with a business, that in that vision of the future, numbers are not there. So in other words, what you don't want to say is that we want to be $1 billion company by 2019, all right? And I've worked with organizations like that. I've come in after they've established a vision like that. I wasn't involved in that process. And they're not really great companies to work for because they're working for the cash. They're working for the money. What you want to do when you create a vision is you want to create of what is your organization or what's the value that you give to the community, but what's also the value that you give to you. And when you create that vision of something that's exciting, that's moving you forward, that you not only love, but other people want to be involved in, the money will follow. And so when I'm working with clients and they're saying, well, we have to do a budget or we have to bring more people in, I'll say, that's great. That's all going to come after that vision. So to speak about that for a landlord, you really need to have this compelling vision of the future. That's what's it going to look like? Not just the numbers, all right? Not just I'm going to have 20 houses or 25 houses. Because you know what? When you have 20 houses, you're going to want to own 30 houses. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to want 40 properties. And then you're going to want 50 properties. Well, great. So you've got all these properties, and how do you sleep at night, And so that's really what it comes down to is What does it feel like? And I'm also going back a lot to feelings about this. What does it feel like in your gut? And in your gut when you're on track with a vision. It's like, boy, this feels right. Let's go over that. And you get very energized around that. And then when you go through those tough times, like when Steve said, when somebody, the 3 o'clock in the morning wake up, there's a problem with my property, or, I'm waking up and going, I don't know if I should have this property or not. When you have those tough times, that's the vision that pulls you through. Nothing else does that but that compelling vision.
Yeah, it's excellent. So a lot of the things that landlords are going to be looking for when they're creating their vision, like you mentioned, is how do they feel? And so are they involving their family in that? Are they kind of looking at it in the terms of my time with family? How does this make me feel in terms of my own freedom? So I'm trying to remove money from the equation, right? And we all know that sometimes money can create that freedom. But if we're removing that, this is just purely, I've built the life that I envision, I really want for myself. And of course, it's going to include things like time with family and things like that, right?
Right. And oftentimes the question that people ask when you're creating a vision for the future, particularly a personal one, is like, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? And that just takes a lot of stuff away. Well, then people begin to go, boy, I do this, or I do this, or I do this, or I do this. And if you look at visions, if you look at, inventions, if you look at the microphone and the computer that we're working on today, they were once just ideas in someone's mind. All they were. And someone had the vision to carry that through to make it the magnificent product that it is. Same way with being a landlord. You've got this idea that, I'd like to own some properties, okay? And I'd like to create some passive income from that. But then what builds on that is just like any other business, any other organization, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it does, Steve, come down to that question of, do I want to spend all of my time managing properties, all of my time dealing with property issues, or do I want to structure my organization in a way that I do that sometimes? Or also one of the big things too is that how much freedom do I want to have? And freedom is really crucial for entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs go into business because they like to be free. Mm-hmm. They don't want to ask somebody, can I take today off? They don't want to say to someone, well, you need to be here from 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 5:30. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be here from 9 to 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm not coming in the next day, because I'm on a spurt. And that's the beautiful thing about being an entrepreneur, where you can really push towards when you have that energy, you go for it. And when you need to lay back and recharge, you can do that as well. And if we take a look at how people work naturally, it's really not very natural to be working consistently 8 to 5. You need to have that break in there. You need to step away. And sometimes it's not 5 days in a row and 2 days off. Maybe it's 3 days on and 4 days off, or interspersed throughout there. You need to step back. You need to get that break. You need to get that perspective, so then you can check on your vision.
Yeah, it was interesting. You were mentioning entrepreneurs, as myself as an entrepreneur. My family often, has this misconception. I'm the business owner, so I can just do whatever. Yeah, I get to leave whenever I want. I work 1 day a week or whatever. So I kind of draw a connection with this vision to also help manage success. And that might sound crazy, but for somebody who has had some success, or for landlords who may own a bunch of properties, I think it's also important to keep that vision in mind for your own happiness, because you can travel down that path where you're just working too much. There's no stop, there's no quit. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, you sort of have that, you need to have that innately, that sort of drive. But having the vision and to see the bigger picture also might help you to sit back and enjoy some of those things and successes that you've had, right?
Right. I mean, successes are not just numbers. I mean, because, when I was doing a lot of traveling, I was traveling a lot. And what you do in my business is that, like, a client calls, and you're booked. I mean, and so I was in airplanes a lot. I'm a 1,000,000-mile flyer on American now. Was on U.S. Airways. But when a client calls, you really do need to do your best to be there. And oftentimes people will say, well, you don't have to do that. You work for yourself. Well, yes, you do. Okay. Because you do have payroll to make. You do have bills to pay. You have to pay your own mortgage and stuff. So there is that involved. And so if the idea that an entrepreneur has ultimate control over his time is not real, all right? You have things that you have to have done on certain times. The beautiful thing about the entrepreneur is that you can decide how you're going to get your work done. So instead of saying, I really got to push this through today, well, can I wait a day? Or, what, I really want to have these 3 days off, so I'm going to push through and get this stuff done now so I can make that time. So your time management and your ability to have more free time for you to recharge, Or what I know most entrepreneurs do is that when they're not working, they're thinking about the business. That's the beautiful thing about having really that control over your time. And being a landlord really allows you to do that.
Well, I think a lot of this is interesting too, because I think about if you're a landlord and you haven't really given serious thought to your vision, but you want to grow your business, if you really define what that vision is down the road and how it's going to make you feel, and like kind of use it as like a litmus test in some ways to when you have to make a decision then. So if you had a kind of a certain date in mind, or maybe just a feeling that you want to be left with your business 10, 20 years down the road, maybe when you come to a crossroads and you have a decision in front of you, you might be able to make that decision a little bit easier because you kind of have something to compare it against rather than just kind of walk in blind.
Absolutely. When we talk about creating a vision, we talk about two things. What does the vision say you're going to do? And what does the vision say you're not going to do? And so when you have opportunities that come your way, or a property that comes your way and it doesn't fit your vision, it's very easy to let it go. All right. Instead of saying, well, there's another property there and it looks good and maybe it's going to work for me. Well, no, if it doesn't match with my vision, then I'm not going to spend the time to work on that. And I have to tell you, that's when I've made those mistakes, it's like, that's not comfortable and that's not me. So yeah, Eric, to your point exactly, a vision tells you what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, and what's the picture of where you want to be out there in the future.
How important is it to revisit your vision, or sort of, go back and see exactly what that vision was? And is it important to structure a new one, or are you always working on that original vision?
Well, I think, as people grow, visions grow and change. As I was coming up through the years, my vision was, my vision did have numbers based to it. And it drove me crazy because every year it was like, okay, I need to get a bigger number or a bigger number and a bigger number. And for me, it was like, how big are the audiences and how big is the fee going to be? And then now when I've switched that around and I've looked at what I'm really in this business for, and really in the business of loving what I'm doing and doing the work, envisioning and creativity that I'm doing, it's really changed. And so one of my recent visions is I do excellent, exciting work and creativity with the people that I love. Now, there's a number of things that are kind of crazy about that in the visions. First off, when people talk about visions in an organization, love very seldom comes into that. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't love what you're doing, why are you doing it? Mm-hmm. And if you don't really have a love for your business or what you're creating or the people that you're doing that with, why bother? All right. So there's that. And the thing about that is putting that out there. What that's done for me is it's brought people into my life, some that I haven't worked with in years, that are saying, hey, let's work on this project together. Or, hey, I've got this coming. Or I just made a decision not to accept a job because it was coming up too fast. And I really wanted to devote the time working with my students at the university rather than flying off to the West Coast to do a 5-hour gig and taking 3 days of my life for that. So that really helps to make the decisions. And then you can let that rest. Okay, I'm done. I've made the decision on that. All right. As opposed to saying, I should have taken that job. It's going to pay me really well. I could squeeze that in. You get to a point in your life where you say, there's going to be other opportunities coming down the pipe. So
that's excellent, Roger. So let me ask you, as a landlord that's listening right now, what's some of the steps that they can take to help create their vision and to be successful?
Well, Steve, I'm really glad you asked that. And as a matter of fact, what there's going to be in addition to this podcast is what I'm going to outline right now. You can actually get from the website and go through this whole process, because there's an actual process for visioning, and it works whether you're in any aspect of the industry. So first, you need to begin to ask some questions. So what are some things that you'd like to do better? What opportunities might be on your mind? What might be some wishes in any relation to your life that you'd like to accomplish? Then you look through those, and then you select your vision. And a vision should be compelling. It should be exciting. It should be something you'd be willing to work on. It should be something that stretches you. In other words, maintenance is not a goal. I tell folks it should sparkle at you or even jump off the page at you. So then once you've selected your vision, rewrite the vision in the first person present tense as if you'd already accomplished that vision. So you want to use words like I am or I have. When you're creating a vision, never say I am going to, because your brain doesn't understand that. Now, the interesting thing about this is when you phrase your vision like I am or I have, and you think about where your life is right now, what we call your current reality, what goes on is there's tension that's created with that, because your brain says, oh no, you don't have that yet. Because here's where we're at right now. That tension is a good thing. And the thing that resolves that tension is choice. Every day we have a choice to move in the direction of our vision, and you'll move in that way, or to move in the direction of your current reality, and you stay pretty much the same. So that's the third thing, is to rewrite that vision in the first person present tense. tense. And then you need to check your vision. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier. Make sure you have some personal responsibility for it. Make sure you're visioning for yourself and not for somebody else to change their behavior. Make sure you have some desire to do it, that you believe it can be possible, that you accept that vision once you receive it, okay? Oftentimes people are much more interested in the process of pursuing as opposed to saying, hey, I'm living the vision now. And we put all that stuff together, that's what we call intention. So when you have some intention around that, then that's where your power is at. And then describe that vision in the first person present tense. And at this stage of the game, I want you to draw out your vision. And this is what I talked about with the Los Angeles Times. What does your vision look like? And drawing ability doesn't matter, all right? Oftentimes people say, well, I can't draw. Well, I can't draw very well either, but stick figures and colors. The more colors you have, the more stuff you have in it, the more explain it, the better you're going to be at that. And then what I find helpful also is then to compare that vision with your current reality. So what's your picture of your vision look like? And then draw what a picture of your current reality looks like. And then when you compare those two, ask yourself, what's stopping me from moving from my current reality to my vision? And we ask yourself, what's stopping me about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times? The answer to that is then going to give you the specific steps that you need to move towards your vision. And that is essentially the vision process. And as I mentioned, we'll have this available with this little a graphic that'll walk folks right through that whole visioning process. That will be able for you to be able to see exactly and do exactly what I explained.
Yeah, I don't think it's a stretch, Eric. Maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm sort of drawing a parallel here with a lot of work that we do with landlords. So a lot of landlords will come to us, buy a background check, get the background check on a prospective tenant, and then say, what do I do with this, right? They don't really know, okay, great, I got all the data here. I think in that situation, a landlord is creating that vision of what they see as a perfect tenant in their mind.
Okay.
And that person may have, it may be something as simple as they've never been evicted. Or it could be, they seem like really great people and you connected well, you got that great gut feeling or whatever it is. But when we deal with landlords that come in without that vision and are sort of expecting us to give them the answer, which we don't, they're sort of left feeling helpless or without any type of direction. So I'm sort of drawing that parallel there, even just to create something as simple as, does your vision include how well your business is running or how you're managing it? And those things are going to determine the type of people you want in there. And that's going to help determine the types of decisions that you might make. And that's going to help give you that gut check that you were talking about. So if something's not sitting right with you, if that person doesn't align with what you feel is your vision for, how you're managing your property or what type of people you want in that property, then you're going to get that sort of twinge or gut feeling.
Well, Steve, that's a really great point because what I described to you is sort of the general overall visioning process. But I think what you can do, and this might be the next product we come up with here, is developing a vision map for what landlords want to create when they're working with their tenants. And some of those questions I asked here that are really general, you could make a bit more specific and build that in. And so when you use that as a checklist, so that when your landlords are screening a tenant, they can go through this checklist and say, look, does this tenant match my vision of who I want to be in my property? So, wow, that's a great blend. Great build.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Like I said, I feel like there's a lot of parallels there. And for landlords, a lot of times you're going off your gut.
Yes.
Right? So I think it's really important to understand what your vision is or what you want out of something. Otherwise, those gut checks might not be completely in tune.
Right. And a vision guides action. And when you know what that vision is, then you can begin to really take action on that. And the vision, as I mentioned when we start out, it's not verbal, it's not words, all right? It's pictures, it's feelings, all right? And when you have those things lined up, then, well, you know yourself. I mean, when you feel good about a project, you have a lot of energy around it. When you feel lousy about a project, you put it off forever. Same thing with when you're working in a business, when you're working with tenants and stuff. If you've got a tenant that you feel good about, you're going to make sure that tenant is working out well and everything works out well. So it all has to line up.
It's excellent.
Yeah, and as far as the resource Roger was talking about, we have an infographic that we'll have for you on the website. You can just go to the resources section on our website, down to the podcast, and you can find this. This is episode 141, I believe. I'll have to double check on that. I'm kind of doing that from memory, but just look that up. You'll see Roger Firestien. And also, you can check out Roger's website, rogerfirestien.com. It's ROGERFIRESTIEN.com. Firestien. And I definitely recommend you check that out. He actually has some free resources on there as well. He actually has that book that I mentioned earlier in the episode here, Why Didn't I Think of That? He's got a free copy of that on there. I definitely recommend it because what it does is it's a very short read that you can kind of just reframe your thinking on how you approach problem solving. We were kind of laughing earlier about deferring judgment. That's something you'll learn in that book that is definitely very helpful for you. So I just want to take the time here to just thank you, Roger, for stopping by the office and kind of sharing.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And anything you have, Steve?
I think I've caught myself a couple of times just totally off guard, sitting here totally engrossed in everything Roger's saying. And I'm
Thank you.
So it's great. I really feel like for landlords that want to have that balance in their life, I think that setting a vision is so important. It's critical. So I urge you to go to the website, check it out, start to work on your vision. And I think you'll be shocked how things start to fall in place. You're not fighting against the current anymore.
Absolutely.
When you know what the outcome should look like. So great stuff, Roger.
Thank you very much. A real pleasure to be here today.